The federal government could shut down. A lot of things can happen that we're not really ready for. The volcanic cloud has closed the skies over the UK, the Netherlands, Scandinavia, and northern France and Germany. How many times bigger is that one? Oh, like probably 4,000 times bigger. The unthinkable is about to happen in Yellowstone Park, and we fear we may soon experience an event that is worse than the one that occurred at Mount St. Helens. In 1980, a massive volcano erupted at Mount St. Helens in Washington, officially the deadliest, most destructive volcanic eruption in U.S. history. The eruption ultimately claimed 57 lives, killing 57 people with massive damage to dollars worth of infrastructure. This was one of the most catastrophic eruptions in history. Now, in a horrifying twist that has left scientists confused, it appears this devastating event is about to happen again, as scientists have just discovered that the massive dome-shaped uplift in the center of the Yellowstone caldera, which they have been monitoring for years, is rapidly increasing in size. And the fear of this has caused the U.S. government to shut down the park. How severe is the situation? Is there a way to mitigate the risks? Let's find out. In past shutdowns, up to a third of national parks have closed and turned people away. Yellowstone's volcanic history. Yellowstone National Park is one of Earth's most beautiful and captivating places. It is home to towering mountains, cascading waterfalls, vibrant hot springs, erupting geysers, and diverse wildlife, from grizzly bears to gray wolves. No wonder millions of visitors flock to experience its splendor every year. However, beneath the serene surface of Yellowstone's majestic landscapes lies a sleeping beast, one of the largest supervolcanoes on the planet, which has the potential to unleash cataclysmic destruction on a global scale should it ever awaken from its millennia-long slumber. Now there's a growing cause for concern, as troubling signs suggest this sleeping giant may be stirring once more. Recently, scientists have detected a rapidly increasing dome-shaped uplift in the center of the Yellowstone caldera, indicating increased pressure and deformation within the volcano's magma chamber. This worrying sign of unrest has both researchers and state authorities on high alert, leading to the U.S. government closing the park. America's iconic Yellowstone National Park was closed for the first time in 34 years. To fully understand why this dome-shaped uplift has scientists and authorities so concerned, we must revisit the catastrophic consequences of a similar deformity caused in Yellowstone thousands of years ago. Over the past few million years, Yellowstone National Park has been shaped by not one, not two, but three huge volcanic events, with the earliest and most significant of these happening around 2.1 million years ago. The first of these cataclysmic occurrences was the Huckleberry Ridge eruption, an unimaginably powerful event that caused a mind-boggling 600 cubic miles, 2,500 cubic kilometers of volcanic ash, rock, and gases to be released into the atmosphere. The eruption was so massive that it opened up a gigantic crater or caldera on the Earth's surface, measuring around 47 by 53 miles across. That was the largest eruption Yellowstone has ever seen, because even in the aftermath, all the volcanic material that was released during the rage covered the landscape for miles and miles around, burying everything under heavy layers of lava. Entire forests, rivers, and any living creatures unlucky enough to be in the area were just stricken and destroyed. But the devastation didn't stop there. The massive plumes of ash and gases released during the eruption spread worldwide by winds and, in turn, blocked a ton of sunlight from reaching the Earth. The eruptions shot smoke and ash 6 miles into the air. There was no immediate report of any injuries, triggering major global climate changes like sharply reduced temperatures and disrupted weather patterns, and also causing devastation on a large scale which led to crop failures, famines, and even unrest in many parts of the world. The event triggered the much-dreaded acid rain, which contaminated water supplies and was toxic to plant and animal life on a continental scale. The Huckleberry Ridge eruption was an event of an unimaginable scale and destructive power, so much so that its effect was felt in most of the United States, reaching very far locations that we wouldn't even think it would reach. In fact, reports have it that when it was over, 1/3 of the continent was in complete darkness for hours due to what was released into the air. To interpret its magnitude, studies show that it was over 2.5 times larger than the Lava Creek eruption 630,000 years ago, which was already one of the most catastrophic volcanic events in Earth's history. Sadly, with the recent seismic activities in the park and the rapidly increasing Sour Creek dome-shaped uplift, we fear that we're about to have another global catastrophe. What's the thrill about this uplift? History of Yellowstone uplifts. As we all know, Yellowstone is home to one of the planet's most active and dynamic geological systems. Throughout its history, it has experienced numerous episodes of uplift and deformation as magma and hydrothermal activity build up beneath the surface. Because of that, scientists have been keeping a very close eye on these uplifts, closely monitoring them to assess the potential for future volcanic unrest or even eruptions. In 1923, they made a pretty incredible discovery. The center of the Yellowstone caldera had risen by over 28 inches since the last measurements. It was like the whole area was slowly swelling and expanding, and surprisingly, it wasn't just a one-time thing. For over 60 years, from 1923 to 1985, scientists observed a continuous rise in the ground levels across the caldera. The Earth just kept getting higher and higher. But then, in the mid-1980s, things started to change. The U.S. Geological Survey detected a significant spike in seismic activity. As radon decays, it forms radioactive isotopes with unique chemical signatures that scientists can measure, and other signs of volcanic unrest at Yellowstone. In 1986, seismic activity in the region increased dramatically, with hundreds of small earthquakes recorded every month. There was also clear evidence of the ground deforming, rising, and falling in certain areas. These were unmistakable signs that the Yellowstone volcanic system was becoming much more active. Needless to say, this had the National Park Service and other federal agencies concerned about the possibility of a catastrophic eruption. So, in the summer of 1987, they took some preventive measures and initiated a partial closure of Yellowstone National Park. The areas they decided to close off included some of the park's most iconic spots, like the Old Faithful Geyser Basin and other thermal regions in the center of Yellowstone. These were deemed the absolute highest risk zones in the event of a major eruption. The National Park Service also put strict limits on the number of visitors allowed into the park's open areas during this time. They weren't taking any chances with this sleeping giant. This partial closure remained in effect for over a year, lasting until the summer of 1988. During that time, the U.S. Geological Survey maintained a 24/7 monitoring presence in Yellowstone, using seismometers, GPS, and other high-tech equipment to track volcanic activity closely. But thankfully, the heightened seismic activity and other signs of unrest eventually started to subside by 1989 without any major catastrophic eruption. And in no time, the Yellowstone volcano returned to normal background levels, and the park could fully reopen to visitors. But that wasn't the end of the story. From the mid-1990s onwards, the behavior of the Yellowstone caldera took an even more mysterious turn. The ground in the huge volcanic crater started acting really strangely, with parts slowly bulging up while other areas sank down, almost like it was moving to some synchronized rhythm. Then, between 2004 and 2010, another major uplift event occurred. During that period, the caldera floor rose upwards by several inches, indicating a significant increase in the volume of the underlying magma chamber. The magma chamber is the source of the park's hydrothermal springs and geysers. Luckily, this 2004 to 2010 uplift didn't lead to any volcanic eruption. The magma eventually redistributed itself without breaching the surface, and the caldera gradually subsided back to its previous elevation. Now, in a recent development that has caught the attention of scientists, another threatening uplift has been detected. And what's most scary is how it is rising faster than anything they'd seen before, which has had the U.S. government to seriously contemplate shutting down the park again as it appears the supervolcano is recharging for an even more disastrous event. one that may surpass the previous 3 supervolcanoes combined. It'll be interesting to see how they make sense of this latest discovery and whether there's any way to try and mitigate the potential fallout. So, let's delve deeper. The terrifying, rapidly increasing dome-shaped uplift that got the authorities reeling. Sometimes, the most groundbreaking scientific discoveries start with the simplest of observations. That's exactly how it went down with this Yellowstone uplift situation. A geologist named Dr. Robert Smith from the University of Utah was taking a stroll around Yellowstone Lake one fateful day when he noticed that the water level seemed a bit off, as it was fluctuating in an irregular pattern. Now, most people probably wouldn't have given that a second thought, but not Dr. Smith, as he had a keen eye for this. Curious, he started to dig deeper, only to realize to his greatest shock that those subtle shifts were a sign of something much bigger happening. Experts say if Yellowstone was about to erupt, there'd be more troubling signs. Magma rising to the surface might cause more frequent and stronger earthquakes. A deep dome had developed within the Yellowstone caldera. Eager to understand this phenomenon better, Dr. Smith decided to conduct a more detailed survey of the area. So he reached out to a fellow geologist, Dr. Robert Christensen, and shared his findings, who was also interested. Dr. Robert secured some funding, and they conducted a full-blown survey of the area. And what they uncovered was truly remarkable. Over the past 50 years, the Yellowstone caldera has lifted by about 2/3 of a meter. So this dramatic dome-shaped uplift was a clear sign that the magma system under Yellowstone was still very much alive and active. The data they got suggested that either new magma was intruding the crust, or the hydrothermal system was heating up and causing the ground to expand upwards. Let's dive a little deeper to understand the science behind this dome-shaped uplift better. It all starts with accumulating large volumes of silicic magma in the shallow subsurface. As this magma builds up, it causes the overlying ground to lift and form faults. Eventually, the magma reaches a critical point where it can no longer be contained, and then it erupts violently through ring fractures. This eruption causes parts of the magma chamber to empty, after which the ground above sinks, forming a gigantic caldera. But that's not where the story ends. The movement of magma deep underground causes the surface to start swelling upwards, creating these huge dome-shaped features called resurgent domes. Now, the really fascinating thing about resurgent calderas, like the one at Yellowstone, is that they're some of the biggest volcanic structures on the entire planet. It's all thanks to this intricate network of cracks and faults in the Earth's crust, particularly those ring-shaped faults surrounding the caldera. Those faults act like pathways, allowing the magma to push upwards and lift the ground into classic dome shapes. As more magma flows in, the domes just keep growing bigger and bigger. You can even see little eruptions of lava breaking out along those ring fractures, add even more volcanic activity to the mix. It's a constantly evolving dynamic process. In the case of Yellowstone, there are 2 major resurgent domes that scientists have really been keeping tabs on, the Sour Creek Dome and the Mallard Lakes Dome, both located right under Yellowstone Lake. The Sour Creek Dome, in particular, experienced a major uplift between 1923 and 1985, causing the lake water to tilt southward. Since then, it's either been gradually declining or holding steady, but the seismic activity and elevation changes are still being watched very closely. These resurgent domes are like windows into the magmatic systems deep below the surface. Any changes in their size, shape, or earthquake activity can be a huge clue about what's happening with the magma movement underground. The bigger the magma chamber, the bigger the eruption. And that's crucial information for scientists trying to stay one step ahead of potential volcanic eruptions. The key thing to understand is that the rapid increase in the size of these dome-shaped lifts can be an indicator of significant magma movement underneath them, which could potentially lead to volcanic activity. Don't get me wrong, the size increase alone is insufficient to determine if a volcano will occur. Other factors, such as the pressure, composition, and behavior of the magma and the geological conditions in the area, also play crucial roles in determining if and when a big volcanic event might occur. Now, though not all resurgent domes will lead to volcanic eruptions, The geological conditions in the area, such as the presence of fractures or faults as we earlier mentioned, can influence the likelihood of a massive volcano. And sadly, Yellowstone International Park happens to be located at one of such places. This explains why the government and scientists are scared, because with the rate at which it is increasing, who knows when the next supervolcano will erupt? Well, as unbelievable as it sounds, what if we told you that the dome uplift is not the only thing threatening the peace of the US government? Yes, you heard right. Scientists recently uncovered some other alarming seismic activity deep beneath this treacherous landscape that has got experts scrambling to understand what this ancient volcanic beast might have in store. Recent seismic activity in Yellowstone. Let's dive into the latest seismic activities that have everyone on high alert at Yellowstone National Park. In April 2024, the seismograph stations operated by the University of Utah detected a whole lot of earthquake activity happening within the national park. Though the earthquakes were not earth-shattering here, the numbers were certainly enough to raise some eyebrows. In April, they located a total of 152 earthquakes in the Yellowstone region. Nearly 200 earthquakes were recorded in Yellowstone National Park in the past 2 weeks. And while the biggest one was only a 3.1 magnitude microquake, it still had the researchers paying close attention. To even compound it, 2 distinct earthquake swarms happened that same month. The first one was an ongoing sequence of 86 quakes, all clustered about 10 miles north-northeast of West Yellowstone, Montana, which lasted from April 23rd through the 30th, with that magnitude 3.1 tremor being the largest. Then, there was a second swarm, a bit smaller with 19 earthquakes, located around 6 miles north of West Yellowstone. This one happened throughout April 28th and 29th, with the biggest quake being a 1.7 magnitude. A sudden increase in seismic activity like this suggests there has been a measurable disturbance occurring deep beneath the surface, likely involving the movement or pressurization of the magma body that fuels the Yellowstone supervolcano. When a volcano becomes restless like this, with heightened seismicity and other signs of unrest, it can indicate the volcano is entering a more active phase of its cycle. Now, seismic activity like this is pretty common and normal in the Yellowstone region, as they account for around 50% of the total earthquakes, as they are usually a sign that the magmatic and hydrothermal systems deep underground are stirring things up. But this time, the spike in the number of earthquakes is a confirmation that there has been a significant departure from the usual baseline seismicity in the region, which is very disturbing, especially when you consider that Yellowstone is sitting on top of one of the largest supervolcano systems in the world, and a little malfunction in seismicity, like the shifting and pressure buildup of magma, which will cause the surrounding rock to fracture and slip, generating these sequences of earthquakes enough to set rolling a spiral of very catastrophic quakes, volcanoes, or other major events that will engulf the whole world again. With this latest discovery, it seems there's no escape route for us, as an eruption will likely happen either from these or from the dome uplift. It's really scary to think of. With the implications it poses, can anything be done to salvage the situation? Previous attempts to salvage the situation. At Yellowstone National Park, the Yellowstone supervolcano had always fascinated scientists and the public. But as the years passed, the growing threat it posed could no longer be ignored. It was this looming danger that catalyzed the formation of a dedicated team of scientists, brought together from across the country, to devise a plan that would safeguard the region and, in the process, unlock the volcano's untapped potential in 2013. Assembled at the renowned Jet Propulsion Laboratory, this eclectic group of geologists, volcanologists, and energy experts began unraveling the supervolcano's mysteries. What they uncovered was both fascinating and deeply troubling. Their investigations revealed that Yellowstone produced enough heat each year to power 6 industrial power plants. Yet only a fraction of this immense thermal energy escaped through the park's famous hot springs and geysers. The rest, they discovered, remained trapped underground, building up tremendous pressure within the volcano's magma chamber. If left unchecked, This pressure could one day trigger a catastrophic super eruption, devastating the surrounding region and potentially impacting the global climate. As the scientists pored over the findings, a bold and innovative solution came to mind. What if they could harness this trapped heat and turn it into a sustainable, renewable energy source? To do that, they were going to drill a series of deep wells, some reaching up to 10 kilometers below the surface around the perimeter of the supervolcano. These wells would serve a dual purpose. This was how they planned to carry it out. First, they would pump cold water into the depths, gradually cooling the rock surrounding the magma chamber, much like a car's cooling system. This cooling process, the scientists believed, would help stabilize the volcano and reduce the risk of a catastrophic eruption. Then that same heated water, which would have reached temperatures of up to 340 degrees Celsius, would be drawn back up through the wells and used to drive electric generators, creating a power station capable of providing energy to the surrounding region for tens of thousands of years. But while planning, they immediately encountered a huge challenge when, to their dismay, they realized that extracting the 20 gigawatts of energy required to cool the volcano to a safe temperature would take an estimated 16,000 years and cost a staggering $3.46 billion, a sum equivalent to nearly 20% of NASA's annual budget. And if care is not taken, the very act of cooling the rock, the team acknowledged, could potentially create fractures near the magma chamber, triggering the very super eruption they were trying to prevent in the first place. It was a risk that could not be taken lightly, and the team knew they would need the full support and resources of the government to even attempt such a bold and audacious undertaking. But with this apparent risk, their proposal was not taken into consideration. And so, the government searched for alternative measures, how the government can mitigate the situation. When it comes to a volcanic system as massive and unpredictable as Yellowstone, there's really no simple solution. The truth is, the science behind these giant volcanic systems is just so darn complex and unpredictable. But that doesn't mean there aren't some important steps we can take to better prepare and respond in the event of growing volcanic unrest. First and foremost, continuous monitoring and data collection is absolutely critical. We need to maintain and even expand the comprehensive network of seismometers, GPS sensors, satellite imagery, and other geophysical instruments that will monitor the volcano round the clock. That way, we can catch even the slightest rumblings or changes deep underground that could signal potential trouble. And it's not just about collecting the data, we've also got to put it to good use. The scientists can take all that information and feed it into their fancy computer models, simulating different volcanic scenarios to better understand how Yellowstone might behave. With these advanced simulations, they can assess the potential impacts of an eruption or other major events and identify the areas that are most at risk. Of course, these risk assessments can't just be a one-time thing. Yellowstone is a living, breathing geological giant, so the team has to stay on top of things, regularly updating their models and forecasts as the situation evolves. That way, they can quickly adjust their plans and be ready to respond to any unexpected developments. Also, armed with that knowledge, local and regional authorities can then work on developing comprehensive emergency preparedness and response plans. We're talking about things like identifying evacuation routes, stockpiling essential supplies, reinforcing critical infrastructure, and coordinating communication protocols. And it's not enough to just have these plans, we've got to practice them through drills and exercises to make sure they're rock solid. Also, given the potential global impact of a major Yellowstone eruption, international cooperation and data sharing between scientific organizations is absolutely paramount. Coordinating monitoring efforts, sharing research findings, aligning emergency response strategies could vastly improve our overall preparedness. Though the implications of a volcanic event happening in the Yellowstone National Park is dreadful to say the least. Do you think it'll be like the ones that plagued the park in the 1980s? What are your thoughts on this? We'll be waiting to hear from you in the comments section, but while at it, do like, subscribe, and share for more updates on this. Thank you.